Welcome, everyone. My name is Chris Sirma. I'm the Dean of the College of Letters and Science, GWSP. I'd like to welcome you to another year of our community lecture series. This has become something of a tradition, and we have one of the founders of this tradition in the audience. Sue David is back there. I guess you and Charles came up with this idea of engaging the community, and it's something we need to do more of, and we're trying to do much more of it this year at the university and in the college. I wanted to mention that this series is really an opportunity for the college and the university to highlight the kinds of scholarship and the kinds of expertise that our faculty have. We have been dinged lately, which would be putting it mildly, by the political climate that exists within the upper Midwest. And for that reason, we've been scratching our heads as to what it is maybe we've been doing wrong. And one of the theses that has come out of that discussion is that perhaps when we have folks talking about what they do, they're teaching what they do, but they're not engaging with what they do. And so one of our missions, the change of our mission at the university, actually our morphology of where we want to go, is we want to begin to engage you more, which means hands-on stuff. What is it that we do that we could have an agency in the city working on with us? What is it that we do that the schools can help us with? Where can we have kids in our classes watching what we're doing as scholars? Keith is a particularly interesting scholar, and I'll talk a little bit more about him in a minute, but he represents the kind of faculty that we have at our institution. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, but having said that, we're very, very proud of the expertise that this faculty at this institution brings to central Wisconsin. Stevens Point would be quite a different place without UWSP. Wouldn't you agree? Having said that, this is really an opportunity for us to showcase and to engage you. And just to give you a sense for where we're going with the series this year, I won't take too much more of your time, Keith, if you don't mind. We're going to have a talk on the elections of 2012. We're going to have a talk on the Thanksgiving turkey. We're going to have a talk on jumping jeans and soybeans. We're going to have a talk on why study foreign lands. We'll have a talk on wood smoke and chemistry. We'll have a talk on understanding the family at the end of life and hospice care. And we'll have a talk on the legacy of local elders and oral history. I mean, this cuts across the spectrum of the humanities, the social sciences, and the natural sciences, which is what we are as a university. So having said that, it's really a pleasure for me to be here before you, and I want you to take this message on the road with you. And so part of what I'd like you all to do is make sure you have one of our brochures. Grab 4 or 5 of our brochures and take them to friends, give them to friends, and tell them to show up here. Because what we do is truly extraordinary, and we don't want to keep it to ourselves. Having said that, our speaker tonight is Dr. Keith Rice. I'll give you a little bit of background on Keith. I gave him a hard time because I told him to send me a bio, not a treatise. And I got this interesting, but much of this I've actually made up myself, but some of it he gave me as well. Keith is the is a professor of geography and director of the UWSP GIS Center. He received his PhD from the University of Kansas and has research interests in GIS education, map animation, and geospatial visualization. Keith has taught 18 different courses, including advanced cartography and GIS, as well as having developed and implemented the cartography GIS major option and minor. He's a past president of the North American Cartographic Society, a former editorial board member of the Cartographic Perspectives, and a book review editor of Cartography and Geographic Information Science. Over the last 2 decades, he's directed over 100 internships, taught 17 professional workshops, including 2 in Uganda, supervised more than 50 student research projects, served on 32 graduate thesis committees, presented and published 42 papers, and been awarded $3.4 million in grants. He's served as a GIS consultant for numerous local, state, and national agencies and has been a board member of the Portage County Land Records Committee since 1989. He won the UWSP Excellence in Teaching Award twice been bestowed with the College of Letters and Science Distinguished Achievement Faculty Award, and been honored as the UW Region's Teaching Excellence Award winner, the highest award that can be given to a teacher in the state. On the humorous side, he has no hobbies, since he has no free time. And however, he is a science fiction, apparently a science fiction aficionado, is that it? Yeah. And enjoys watching BBC's Doctor Who. How many of us don't enjoy watching that? I know Keith personally as something of a calming voice in a very boisterous college. And someone who always gives me perspective whenever I speak to him about things. And he responds to my queries normally with the phrase, "That reminds me of the time when we," and then he sort of lets it trail off. It's a distinct pleasure to introduce one of our true scholar teachers at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, Dr. Keith Rice.
And welcome everybody here tonight, and especially for any football fans in the crowd, thank you for coming. Since, I was talking to a couple students today, the same idea, and they said, basically, oh, you're going to come to the talk tonight? And they looked at me and they, oh, there's a Packers game on tonight. Packers, Dr. Rice. I said, sorry. But again, that, Wisconsin is so proud of their football team, it makes perfect sense. So.
We were scheduled first, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know if that works as well, but but I thank you for coming. And now tonight, what I'm going to do is kind of talk again the title about geospatial technologies and kind of break it down for you. So it's going to be more of an overview, general talk, but we can also get in specifics. So at the end of this, if you got any specific questions you want to ask about a specific component of the technology I'm going to talk about, feel free, of course, to ask that question. All right, so for us, as human beings, we're being observed all the time and different sorts of satellites, that as we're viewing the Earth and again wondering about all the different physical and human types of features on the Earth itself, we are accumulating all this knowledge, all this information, all this data that we're looking at itself. And so tonight what we're going to do is talk about, again, the geospatial revolution, basically how the world is being reshaped, not from its geographical extent, but in terms of this information that we're utilizing. So first off, kind of ground level, the importance of spatial data is that everyone in this room depends on spatial data in their daily lives. You might not think so, but you do, because we are spatial creatures. I even talk to my class sometimes, my beginning cartography class, I said that even though you've maybe never made a map, you actually have. Because we all have up here our cognitive atlas. Since we were toddlers, or we were, using the colloquial term, rugrats, trying to move across the floor at the same time, we collect spatial data. We are synthesizing, assimilating, we're looking at this. And of course, as you get older, when you're toddler at the same time, you start to make particular landmarks and features very important, such as where is that cookie jar that I can keep going to and see what's inside of it. And part of it is that approximately 80% of all data that we accumulate is spatial in nature. And you could name almost anything, and I would say, again, 4 to 5 times I can find a spatial component to that information. Maps are also a critical form of formulating that spatial data. We've always held a special place in human history about actually using maps, and in fact, maps predate the written word. Before we even were trying to communicate with a written word, we were actually scribing on basically sand, or in terms of components of caves, we were making maps that way because we were trying to communicate from one individual to another where something was in terms of its location. So they provide us with all this accumulated knowledge, and so naturally across cultures, across different sorts of countries, we are always taking a look at that type of information. For example, that little this particular piece of stone up here is actually part of a land ownership map that dates back to the Babylonian times that, again, people were inscribing map information on. So what's happening now? Well, until recently, we always had problems in terms of the ability to basically disseminate information. A lot of information, map information, spatial information, was controlled or was limited by technical problems. I mean, even thinking about when, talking about the printing press, when it was invented and being able to create an atlas and being able to disseminate that was a major achievement of so many hundreds of years ago. But still, there was a limitation to that. But what's occurred over the last 40 years is you've had this explosion of accessibility, and for everybody to be able to start visualizing more information, to be able to start to even comprehend all this data that's being basically shown to us, to be able to give us on different displays, and especially, of course, across the internet. And this has occurred because satellite technology and innovation, and also the increased power in memory and computers, has allowed us this harnessing of this explosion of information, especially in spatial data, to be able to be used by individuals such as ourselves. So there's 4 key technologies why this happened. 1 was remote sensing, 2, Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, 3, Global Positioning Systems, or GPS, and then 4, more recently, the location-based services, what they call LBS, or also called mobile GIS. So we're going to take a look at each one of those. First, remote sensing. We can use the term, can you see me now? Basically, you have aerial and satellite platforms that have been used actually since the 1920s and 30s, but have matured over that particular time, where you had airplanes taking pictures, or if you want to go back to 1880 and 1890, where you had balloons, where people were trying to take aerial shots of individuals in terms of landscapes of cities. But through basically taking eye-in-the-sky pictures, we wanted to be able to view both the physical and the human side in terms of where the physical features might be, such as where that mountain happens to be, but also in terms of human habitation, in terms of where particular streets were laid out. By taking images through specialized types of instrumentations, more recently hyperspectral instrumentation, we can see Earth's view, but not just also with our naked eye, but also looking at other portions of electromagnetic components, such as infrared, that we were never able to see before. So for remote sensing, what kind of information do people actually collect? And again, this is just kind of giving you kind of a spot idea. Spatial resolution. We talk about resolution, spatial resolution all the time. For example, when you buy a TV set, the old TV sets, old, oh, that was 720, resolution. Oh, this now is 1080 resolution. It's the amount of resolving power that you can actually see on the screen. Well, imagery is the same way. How detailed can I get? You also have spectral resolution, which is talking about what types of form that wavelengths I can see of energy that's actually emanating from the Earth or being reflected off of the Earth. We, in fact, when we look at something, such as the table in front of you, we're looking actually at reflected energy. And so we see that color or that shade based upon that. Well, imagery collects the same information. Then there's radiometric resolution, different intensities of radiation, how strong. It's like, whether or not I have a 100-watt light bulb versus maybe just a 30-watt light bulb. What's the intensity itself? And then temporal, how often do we look at the same spot over a period of time? And then also we can get a little, different in terms of the sensors by using passive versus active, so that we can actually basically look at reflected light, which is passive, or we can actually send out maybe a laser beam, which is more active, or maybe some sort of sound wave, and then collect information from that. So there's many different ways that we actually take a look at the Earth itself. And basically what occurs is, therefore, we come up with amazing images of the Earth. We come up with images that we never thought possible, whether or not we're looking at land use patterns, whether or not we're looking at mountain ranges, whether or not we're looking at deserts, whether we're looking at in different sorts of stream systems in basically southern Africa, or we're going and we're looking at in terms of basically urban patterns, land use patterns, whether we're looking at center pivot irrigation, whether we're looking at that in Saudi Arabia, or we're looking at that in central Wisconsin. It gives us all this imagery that is amazing to us in terms of the variety and display, but it also gives us information. It gives us information about the Earth. It gives us information for us to understand the Earth and its processes in such a way that we never thought possible. And again, this all started remote sensing, mostly in terms of using satellite technology for that in the 1970s with using satellites like Landsat. Over time, different sorts of satellites came into place, such as SPOT, which is actually a French satellite, RadarSat, Iconos, GeoEye, QuickBird, WorldView. There's a proliferate of different types of satellites that basically have come into existence, especially in the last 10 years, that have given us finer resolution, that have given us hyperspectral, the ability to measure these different wavelengths in ways that we never thought possible. And this adds to our repertoire of what we can work with. Here, for example, we're looking at a type of radar, side-looking airborne radar, where this is in Central America that has so much cloud cover we can't see anything with a regular camera, but by using this radar technique we can cut through the clouds and then see what's actually on the ground in terms of creating that. Or you might say, why don't we start doing special sort of looking at CSAT radar and trying to measure the bottom of the ocean and seeing what the ocean looks like, where we don't have to have a submersible, we don't have to go in a submarine, we can actually use this special type of laser sighting or radio waves at the same time and take a look. Or maybe we want to use this to measure temporal time periods to take a look at flooding. This was 1993 in north of St. Louis, I believe, where they had the major flooding during that time period. So remote sensing was kind of the first piece. What it allowed us to do was start to see all these different sorts of changes that could take place so that we could understand. Here, for example, is this is in southern Mexico, just north of Guatemala, where you had tropical rainforests being burnt. And so by looking at this imagery, again, you can start to see the clear cutting that's been going down with a slash and burn agriculture in the tropical rainforest. You get a better idea. You get kind of this bigger picture view of what actually is going on in particular areas of the world, and potentially whether or not you want to see a change in those resources or not. This right here is just showing, again, Mexico versus Guatemala. Guatemala has a policy to try to not have as much deforestation, and Mexico, southern Mexico, did not. So you can kind of see those changes. This is all possible when you're talking to people, trying to get them to understand those variations and differences so that they can make decisions. Is this something that you want to have happen or not? And so remote sensing allows us that opportunity to see that. Very quickly, other type of applications. Remote sensing is used all the time for Portage County, especially since, I would say, the 1970s on land cover mapping, land use mapping. You can do change detection, much like we were looking at the rainforest a minute ago. You can do agricultural biomass detection. Something called precision farming uses remote sensing all the time to take a look